Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Please sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Goyal, you are from Punjab, is it?
Yes, sir. I was born in Punjab, but I've been brought up in Delhi.
In Delhi. And you are, after your graduation, your BE, you have worked as a software engineer.
Yes, sir.
So this was where in with Microsoft.
Yes, sir.
But that's a top, absolutely top of the line company. Why did you leave it?
Sir, I believe I would have realized my full potential in the civil service,
Okay,
and I aspire to be a foreign service officer.
very good, very good. So you first did you first worked with what is software department intern where?
Uh, so basically, I worked with Microsoft as an intern. Later on, I got a pre-placement offer from them, and I joined a year later.
Okay, okay. So you were in Microsoft right through from 2016 to 18. 2 years. Huh?
Sir, I did a 2-month intern with them.
Oh.
That was after my third year of college.
I see.
Post that, they offered me a placement,
Right.
and I joined a year later.
And you joined in Hyderabad, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you take a decision that you wanted to join the civil services after your R&D, your stint with Microsoft, or prior to that?
Sir, so when I was 15, I represented my school at the Model United Nations of Germany.
Okay.
And I got a taste of diplomacy back then. After working at Microsoft, I realized that probably I will do better if I am a foreign service officer, and hence I made the decision.
Now, is this your first attempt?
So this is my third attempt, but my first interview.
Third attempt, but first interview, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. आप पूछें क्या?
It is said that we are not fully federal state. What sort of federalism we have, and do you think this is the option we had and we have chosen the right option?
So I believe K.C. Weir, he was a constitutional expert, and he considered India to be quasi-federal. I believe that is viewing Indian constitution and Indian federalism through an American lens. However, I believe that our constitution, our federalism, is a sui generis model based on our histories, our the partition that was happening when the constitution was being written. And despite having a unitary bias, I think this model works best for India.
Let us come to international agreements and international commitments that we undertake. How do we implement it in India under our constitutional setup?
So I believe there's an Article 51 that determines and that asks us to follow the international agreements and decisions. And I think for India, it's a constitutional prerogative to follow international agreements.
Suppose we want to enact, we enter into some commitment for enactment or amendment of certain laws. How do we go about? Does the seventh schedule not come into conflict with it, or is it admitted, or is there something there?
So I'm sorry, sir, I'm not aware of it.
Shreya single judgment. Have you heard about this?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
So it's regarding the Section 66A of the IT Amendment, IT Act 2000, and it respected the judgment respected Shreya Singh's right to freely speak on the internet, and it respected freedom of speech and expression on the internet.
Nowadays, social media is growing now. How do we regulate social media today in today's context?
So, despite democratizing information and media, social media poses its own threats. And recently, the government also brought the social media rules, the IT rules, which posed a responsibility on the social media intermediaries. And I think those rules will help us regulate the social media owing to the concerns of anonymity and privacy that social media poses.
You've heard about the Me Too movement?
Yes, sir.
It started with the social media. And I think it gained legitimacy. Am I correct if I say that it gained legitimacy subsequently?
So the Me Too movement, which started in America, I think it is through social media that people got to know about it, and it respected the feminist movement, and it was for women rights. And I think social media, if it helps the women who faced some kind of harassment, if it helps them to come across openly about whatever they felt, I think it legitimized.
Union Minister had filed a case against the concerning. Are you aware of that? And they have been case.
Uh, so I'm not.
He was Minister of State for it.
Yes, sir.
The IRS has-
Yes, sir. So I'm aware of the
That case
allegations.
ended in and then there was lost practice. It is pending in the High Court.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You were a software engineer in Microsoft,
Yes, sir.
and there is the word micro and there is the word soft.
Yes, sir.
So most of their work is in software engineering or hardware also they have got it.
Micro, as taking cues from your question, Microsoft was named for microservices software when it was established by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Initially, they developed an operating system.
No, are they in hardware also today?
Yes, sir. So today, for example, they make the Surface Pro, the Surface
Pro
Tab.
or Surface also?
Yes, sir. So they have.
Okay, I got it. Right. अच्छा ये बताइए कि Indians as a group and India as a country has done very well in software. Where did we lack in hardware engineering and why?
So I think in hardware, the basic requirement is to have semiconductors to build the hardware, and I think firstly it's due to the lack of semiconductors. We don't have enough resources to manufacture semiconductors.
Okay, let
Yes.
me interrupt you. Very few countries have semiconductors fabrication foundries. They all import from you know which country.
Yes, sir.
And so we could have also imported like we import 100 other things. Was that the only reason?
So
Every country which is doing well today, Europe, Asia, or other, does not have a facility for manufacturing of semiconductors, microchips,
yes, sir.
but they are good in hardware.
So I think our focus primarily was IT services initially, and we also focused a lot on exporting services in IT. So I think initially there wasn't an incentive, but very recently we have the PLI scheme for manufacturing electronics. So I think we are moving towards focusing on hardware now.
If I put it this way, that it was a mistake and a very grave mistake on the part of our leadership, IT, political, or whatever you say, to neglect hardware manufacturing in India. Shall I be justified?
So I think initially when
Yes
we
or no first?
no, sir. So
No, it was
sir.
not a mistake. Okay, then
So I think during those times we focused on services and exporting, and it's now that we see the vulnerability of supply chains, especially after the pandemic, and that is when we see that we need to be self-sufficient.
no. Think about it and read more. Okay, you are talking of semiconductors manufacturing and fabrication. What are the major decisions government of India took in December 21 to encourage semiconductors manufacturing even at the nano scale, 25 nanometer and all? What were the 3 or 4 major decisions? Are you aware?
So I'm aware of the schemes. The first is the production-linked incentive scheme. We are also supporting electronic clusters.
No, that is a different line. Okay, tell me some there were some proposals, there were some measures announced in this year's budget for making digital India more effective, more successful. What were the highlights of that?
So firstly, that comes to my mind is having the RFID passports. So one was the biometrics in the passports.
That was a utility. But how do we support in the budget? What support was announced?
So I'm not aware
No?
of.
Digital university, you heard of?
Yes, sir.
And spreading of optical fiber right up to villages.
Yes, sir.
Ajay, what is the size of our number of mobile phones in India?
So I'm not
Does
sure.
it
of
come
the exact
to
number.
one person per head? One mobile per head?
So I think it comes above 1% per phone.
It comes as a third small question. When Corona was spreading in Western Europe, there was a sudden uprise in Italy, and that arose because of certain, nara given by one of the mayors of an Italian city. Slogan given by a mayor in Italian city. How? No. Okay. Thank
I'm
you.
not aware
Thank
of it. Sorry.
Archita, you given IFS as your first preference, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now you are winning. You won. You participated in intra college competition. Geek opinion. What was that about? Tell me something.
Ma'am, so it was a blog writing competition. The name of the competition was Geek Opinion, and we were supposed to write a blog relating to technologies.
Are you a
And
geek?
yes, ma'am, if you can call me.
You are considered a geek. Okay. Now you read Indian contemporary non-fiction. Which particular one struck you recently as a very good piece of non-fiction?
Ma'am, so very recently I read the book called India versus UK by our former permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Syed Akbaruddin. And I liked the book because it showed and instilled a confidence in me and my country. The way we decided to fight 3 elections simultaneously at the United Nations, and we ended up defeating the United Kingdom and getting our representative elected at the International Court of Justice, Mr. Dalveer Bhandari. I think it swelled me with pride.
Very good. All right. Just yesterday, a bill was introduced in Parliament which underlines India's foreign policy reach. What was that bill?
Ma'am, about yesterday, I'm not.
Okay, it is a bill on the called the Antarctic bill. Do you know something about India's Antarctic policy?
Yes, ma'am.
What are we a member of the Antarctic?
Ma'am, of the Antarctic, I am not sure, but of the Arctic, we are observer of the Arctic Council, and we have a draft Arctic policy as well. We also
No,
have.
in Antarctic, we have signed a treaty 40 years ago,
Yes,
and we
ma'am.
have 2 stations there.
Yes, ma'am.
Which are they?
Ma'am, I think Bharti and Himadri
Bharti and Maitri. Himadri is
is
in
Arctic.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what was this bill about? The bill is to regulate and monitor activities,
Yes.
to prevent any illegal mining, any kind of activity there which goes against the principles laid down for Antarctic. In future, anybody wanting to go on expedition also has to get a permit. Okay, that's the latest on the Antarctic.
Okay.
How many research stations are there?
Ma'am, of India's or total?
No, India has only 2.
Ma'am, I'm not sure of the exact number.
Okay, then 40 permanent stations. The President of India is presently on a state visit to Ashgabat.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me something about where is Ashgabat? What is this visit about?
Ma'am, I think it's the capital city of some Central Asian Republic. I'm not able to
Turkmenistan.
recollect. Turkmenistan.
Okay, tell me something about the visit. Did you read about it?
Ma'am, I think I have not read about it, but I think India is relooking at the Central Asian area, and I think the state visit also pertains
It's
to.
the first visit by a president of India to Turkmenistan after it became an independent nation. Anything you know about trade and connectivity issues relating to Turkmenistan? You've heard of the Ashgabat Agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that agreement?
Ma'am, so the Ashgabat agreement, if I'm recollecting it correctly, it was the 17+1 INSTC corridor also that we were thinking of joining, and it was to connect all the Central Asian republics to the Eastern Europe side. I mean, regarding the Turkmenistan, we also have a pipeline, the Tapi pipeline,
Yeah.
that is
Which other country?
Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, and Iran also, I think.
And now, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature?
I'm not aware of the. I'm not able to recollect it right.
Abdul Razak Gurna.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we had a spate of visits during this ongoing war. Some countries have sent their top representatives to India
Yes.
recently, just over this week.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything you followed about what our external affairs minister conveyed to them, or what our government conveyed?
Ma'am, I think under the ongoing war that we are seeing, we saw a series of visits. We first had the Japanese Prime Minister. Then we also had delegations from the European countries. Very recently, we also have the Russian Foreign Minister visiting us. So I think the underlying reason why these visits have occurred is to build pressure on India to change its stance with respect to the war. And I think, for example, the statements by the US delegation, Mr. Dalip Singh, I think those were pertinent because they stressed on how India has to balance its relations with the West and the US on one hand and Russia on the other.
Aren't we doing that?
Yes, ma'am. I think we are balancing. And I think the Western countries probably want us to take a tougher stance against Russia and Russian aggression. And I think all these visits are being seen in that light.
If you get into the foreign service and in your first posting, you are given the charge of the economic wing, what would your role be?
Ma'am, I think as we can see.
Like economic diplomacy, right?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I think there'll be two priorities which come to my mind. The first would be India's role at the World Trade Organization. I think time and again we have proved that we stand for the Global South and the rights of the Global South. So the first priority will be WTO. The second would be signing free trade agreements with countries which we see potential in. For example, we signed a series of FTAs, or we are in the process of signing FTAs with countries like Japan, with countries like Australia, EU, UAE. We signed very recently.
And you would also look at our trade, no? Export, import.
Yes, ma'am.
With the country in which you are posted also.
Yes, ma'am.
Bilateral.
Yes, ma'am.
Not only multilateral, but bilateral would also be an important focus.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great. First of all, pleasure meeting you, Archita, over here. Please tell me, what is the meaning of the word Archita?
So, sir, Archita means to be worshipped. It comes from the Sanskrit word Archana, which means to pray or prayer. So,
Archita is the object.
yes, sir.
Archita is the object to be prayed.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, behind you and in front of you, there is this Chanakya. Please tell me something about Chanakya Niti, or what do you understand in 5 sentences?
So Chanakya was the man behind the statecraft of Chandragupta Maurya. We also know him as Kautilya. And his treatise Arthashastra is perhaps India's contribution to diplomacy and statecraft. The way he has written about war, we see the earliest mentions of realism and the realism in Indian thought, political thought. And I think he not only helped Chandragupta Maurya consolidate his empire and kingdom, but he also gives a strong message for Indian foreign policy today.
Yeah, but much of this thing since those days, don't you think, has undergone a tremendous change? It's the whole game is of power. Who wields the power?
Yes.
He dictates the terms. If in the Second World War, if the Axis powers would have won, theoretically I am saying, today we would have sung a different tune altogether. Who writes history?
Yes, sir.
The winner writes it all. So in this, what has he said in relation to the power?
So according to Kautilya, might is right. The strong do what they do, and the weak must accept what they have to accept. So I think Chanakya also propounded the same theory of might is right.
So now, bringing down to the present and what ma'am was asking you, that you as a diplomat, where would you position yourself in the global context where India is, and you are representing India in a certain country, and in that context, how would you position yourself, or what would be your thinking? Just assume.
So I think today India is exercising its strategic autonomy, and as a diplomat, I will balance the national interests that India has, along with the civilizational principles and ideas that India has been advocating. So I think my foreign policy, as I would see, would be a balance of both these two.
Okay, think about this subject also, further.
Yes.
And next thing that I would like to ask you is, what are the energy implications of the war in Ukraine? What are the energy implications for the world?
So firstly, it has manifested in different ways, the war, and pertaining to energy. Firstly, Russia is a big exporter of oil. So once the sanctions have come into play, that supply has completely choked, and that
Only
is
oil?
oil and natural gas. And so also, if we see towards the renewable energy and batteries area, a lot of materials like the neon gas and palladium, which are required to manufacture batteries, they are also sourced from Russia as well as Ukraine. So even that, the manufacturing capabilities are being affected due to the ongoing conflict.
So what will happen in Europe, etc., since they are on the other side of Russia, and if they do not get the natural gas and oil, so where are they going to source it from? The heating requirements and so on and so forth.
The other OPEC countries, they are sourcing their oil and energy requirements from that. And we also have heard of reports where they are actually bypassing the sanctions and buying oil from Russia. So that is how they are meeting their energy requirements.
Okay, tell me, which is a graver crisis? In the last 2 years, we were all privy to the pandemic, isn't it so? And you couldn't go out, and we shut ourselves out from practically all outdoor activities. But which means that we gave it a great deal of importance. Our parents told us so, we told our friends that no, we can't meet, and things like that. Everything became virtual. Now, are we giving the same degree of importance to the catastrophe on the climate change front? Your perception.
So I think the pandemic, what we suffered all through these 2 years, is like a wake-up call for the world pertaining to climate change. And even if we haven't taken climate change seriously the way at an individual level we should be taking, I think the pandemic will open everybody's eyes and start a new revolution towards climate change. So, for example, at a personal level, I don't switch on my ACs at home, and I try to use the fan as much as possible, being mindful of the carbon emissions that ACs generate. So I think since the pandemic has instilled first a scientific temper and B a sense of responsibility towards the world, I think climate change will also be handled. I'm optimistic of being
You have to
handled.
be not only practice it at a personal level, but also be a sort of an advocate of this in all communities that you face. But some of these issues I would like you to think about more seriously so that you can have more focused responses. Good. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Goyal, your optional subject was political science and international relations.
Yes, sir.
Now, in political science, there is a theory of separation of powers.
Yes,
What
sir.
is that theory?
So the separation of power theory was propounded by Montesquieu, and he believed that once the powers with respect to execution and legislation are divided, it is better for governance. So that is what he felt. He
So,
meant.
is our Indian constitution following the precepts of separation of powers?
So the Indian constitution is based on a system of checks and balances. It does not advocate a strict separation of powers. For example, we see the accountability of the parliament, of the executive to the parliament. We also see a role of the executive in appointing judges. So I think ours is a system of checks and balances and not strict separation.
Now, the US constitution, that also follows a separation of powers, but they also have checks and balances, don't they?
So they have, but I think in the US, in the case of the United States, we see a strict separation. For example, the executive is not fully responsible to the parliament. But in Indian scenario, considering our colonial past and our society, I think the checks and balances model works better.
Okay, right. Now, you have mentioned as one of your extracurricular activities, what is Vinyas yoga?
Yes, sir.
What is it? How is it pronounced?
So Vinyasa.
Vinyas.
Yes.
Now, how many different types of yoga are there?
Considering the yoga, the renaissance that we see in yoga, there are different schools of yoga. For example, Vinyas that I practice. You also have Hatha yoga, Iyengar yoga, Bikram yoga, and more or less they believe in the same principles, but the way we perform yoga, the asanas, they differ.
So, the one which you have practiced, Vinyas yoga, what is the, how can you say that this is what is the difference between this and the others? Is there any difference?
Yes, sir. So the asanas remain the same, but in Vinyasa, we weave the asanas into a single posture, and it's all about gracefully exiting one posture into another posture. And every time the sequence is over, we perform a Vinyasa, which means a high plank to Bhujangasana to mountain pose, and then we move on to
So,
the
did you attend some place for this kind of yoga?
So I was acquainted with this yoga form while I was working at Hyderabad.
Okay, I
And
see.
that is how I learned.
Okay, right. Now, our relations with China. Now, there are several irritants which continue in our relationship. Border dispute is one of them.
Yes.
What are the other areas in which we have irritants with China?
So interestingly, I read a book since my hobby is reading, and the book is called India versus China by Kanti Vajpayee, and he says that we suffer from a 4P problem in the relations. P, the first P being the perimeter, which is the border dispute, but along with that, the irritants are also the perception that we hold of each other. For example, China holds a perception which is not a favorable perception of India, and also we have the power asymmetry. For example, the trade deficit that we have with China. During the border dispute, we also heard reports of the power sector in Maharashtra being affected by Chinese cyber attacks.
Cyber attacks, yeah.
So that is also another issue. And I think the fourth P being the partnership, as we see that India has developed a proximity with the US, I think our relations with China have also suffered because of the same.
You see, you've quoted from Bukanti Bajpayee. That's all right. It's very nicely written, no doubt about it. But is it just a matter of perception, or is there anything substantial on the ground? After all, you are aspiring for the foreign service,
Yes, sir.
so you should be very, very clear in your thought. Is it a matter of perception with China, or do we have serious problems with China?
Sir, so when he talks about perception,
Forget Kanti Bajpayee. I am asking you, as a aspirant for the Indian Foreign Service, do we have, in your view, serious issues with China or not?
so I think we have, and I think we see that China suffers from a Middle Kingdom syndrome, where it feels that there can only be one sword in Asia, which is China.
No. Ms. Goyal, you are going into a lot of, these terms. I am asking you on the ground.
Okay, sir.
What are the major irritants which we have with China? Do we have any or no?
Yes, sir. So first is the border.
Yeah,
The
border
second
is
is the
it?
trade deficit. The third is the cyber security.
Yeah.
The fourth is. So this
What
is-
about China blocking our attempts at the NSG?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that a cause of irritant for us?
Yes, sir.
CPEC?
Yes, sir.
Why is India, how is India concerned with the CPEC?
So it doesn't respect our territorial integrity.
Exactly.
It passes through what we call as the POK.
That's right, POK. And string of pearls,
Yes, sir.
an attempt by China to build a series of ports, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, okay, now let me come to something else. Article 35A of the Constitution was withdrawn by the government in 2019, right?
Yes.
Along with, so what was Article 35A all about?
So the Article 35A, it pertained to the property rights being in Kashmir limited to people in Kashmir, and it restricted Indians, Indians from other areas to buy property and have rights there
That's
in
all?
Kashmir. So not only property but also rights, other rights.
No, 35A was basically, it empowered the state legislature to declare a person as a resident, permanent resident of the state.
Yes, sir.
And why was this an irritant for the government of India? What was the issue? Why did we have to remove it? Article 370 is a separate issue. Why did we have to abolish 35A? There was a major issue, isn't there?
Yes, sir. So I think it was an important step in the integration of Kashmir into
See,
India.
just to give you a background, you see, after the partition, a large number of migrants from Pakistan came and settled in the Jammu region,
Yes, sir.
about 1 lakh plus, right? And they were not given the status as per Article 35A, and therefore for years they could not vote in the state assembly elections, and they were not entitled to various benefits which the state subjects were given. That is the crux of the issue. And that 1 lakh had grown to 1,50,000 over the years.
Yes.
So it is only now, after withdrawal of Article 35A, that the government has started providing the domicile status to these people, Hindu migrants.
Right, sir.
So that is the crux of the issue, why this had to be removed. Now, Jammu and Kashmir, if you read the newspapers, almost every day there's an incident of violence, militant attacks, terrorist attacks. Why do you think this is happening?
Sir, I think it is primarily due to the involvement of Pakistan, and time and again cross-border terrorism has been an issue.
Okay, good. So now, which are the main groups which Pakistan is sponsoring from across the border?
Sir, one is the Hizbul Mujahideen.
Okay.
Even the LET, very
Yes.
recently, the resistance front was also formed,
Correct.
which was responsible for the killings of Kashmiri
Absolutely.
Pandits.
And one more, Jaish-e-Mohammed,
Yes, sir.
yeah, Masood Azhar.
Yes, sir.
Now, which was again and another
China.
irritant with China, wasn't it? It was
Yes,
only,
sir.
I think, 2 years back that they finally stopped opposing it
Yes, sir, after blocking it 4
after
times.
blocking it, right? Okay. Now tell me, you've heard of the Abraham Accords.
Yes, sir.
What were those?
So the Abraham Accords were signed in 2020 with Israel and UAE, establishing relations with Israel, and it also works as a new Arab-Israel bonhomie
So
that
which
we
were the
see.
countries which recognized Israel? Diplomatic relations established
So
according to the accord? Yeah.
the first was UAE,
Right.
and the second was
Bahrain,
uh,
Bahrain,
yes, sir.
and then
So I think Jordan also.
Sudan and Morocco. These are the countries, right? Okay, thank you. So now we end your mock interview. I will give you feedback. How have you done?
So not so good.
No. Why do you say that? You're very good. You see, for the interview, you will not be able to answer every question. So the best thing to do is that if you are not very sure, because you know your time before the UPSC is limited.
Right, sir.
If you are asked a question and you are not very sure about it, the best thing to do is say, I do not have full knowledge of this. So then the member will turn to something else. So that is the first thing. You see, I asked you on irritants with China and you kept on quoting Kanti Bajpayee.
Thank you.
I am not interested in Kanti Bajpayee's views. I am interested in you as a candidate for the Foreign Service, right? So, you may quote very briefly, but when you are asked a question, please make sure that you are brief and concise. Give some thought to the question which is asked and then be very concise in your answer, right? Now, in the interview, your general knowledge and what is happening daily is very important. So, reading newspapers, आपका तो 8th को है, you don't have very much time.
Yes.
Read a newspaper very, very carefully. My colleague asked you a question on important visits, foreign visits to India. You forgot the British Foreign Secretary. You forgot the Deputy NSA of the US, right? So if you are reading newspapers very, very carefully, because you know a lot of things are happening.
Right.
Domestically, a lot of things are happening. Things are happening in the northeast, in Jammu and Kashmir, in the hinterland of the country. Internationally, events are happening. So you must read a newspaper very, very carefully for the next 7 days at least. And also on the day of your interview, don't forget to read a newspaper. The other area from which you can expect questions is your DAF. Now, your DAF, you had your optional subject of political science and international relations. So, this is an area in which you should revise whatever you had done for your paper. And international relations, since you are an aspirant for the Foreign Service, you should know what is happening all around you. Then you belong to Delhi, then they can ask you something on Delhi, what is the state, what are the issues, negative issues of Delhi, what are the plus points, so be prepared to answer on that. Then you have mentioned you're fond of non-fiction reading, so they can ask you which is the latest book you have read, how did you find it, so be prepared to answer that question. Of course, I asked you something on the yoga. You are fond of listening to FM radio. So, you can be asked questions on the leading question on that also. Are you fond of English music, Hindi music, what kind of music? Those kind of things you can do. And of course, your stint with Microsoft. You were asked certain questions by my colleague, but the fact that this was a job which was paying you 1,75,000 and you have decided to opt for the civil services. That is a question which would be a very legitimate question. So you answered that, but be prepared for that. Okay. Otherwise, you are doing very well. You are very poised. You are able to answer effectively. Those are your plus points. But the more knowledge you have with you, the better you will do in the interview. Right. Now, I'll ask my colleagues if they have anything to add.
I'll say that when Honorable Chairman asked you about irritants with China or any issue that you are speaking on, take up more important points first, more substantive points first, and not so substantive points later. Then because you are a software engineer, you are an engineer, do read about these two things. Digital India in our budget, they are making a massive investment to make Digital India more effective and more relevant to the national life. And this semiconductors, microchip fabrication, they have allotted $10 billion. Though looking at the foundries, it is nothing. It takes 15 to 20 billion, so like that. So these subjects will be relevant for you, and software versus hardware is an old issue. Thank you.
So this is the one that you're talking about, December 2021.
Yes.
Okay.
There are three major decisions taken. A very heavy subsidy out of this $10 billion, then 5% on net sale for 5 years of certain items.
Thank you, sir.
Archita, you're very composed, you don't get flustered, and as you've already been told, be brief, to the point, and always give your view, You don't have to quote anybody, you give your views directly. And do you wear saris?
Yes, ma'am, I'll wear a sari on the day.
On the interview you will
Yes.
wear? Yeah, it looks more formal,
Yes.
and you're comfortable in a sari, right?
Ma'am, I'll practice at home.
So just a suggestion.
Yes.
And otherwise, as I said, I think the newspaper reading should be really done every day till your interview and on the day of your interview. Very often they begin by asking what was today's highlights, to throw you off guard. All the best. You should do well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I think there's nothing much that I wish to add, except that, be slightly more confident. 3%, 4% more confidence would help. After all, you see, you have come there's so many options in the employment market, and you've come for something and you're good. That's all we would like to tell you.
Give it a full
And
full throttle.
so, and full throttle, and then some of the areas which we questioned, there was a representative. What they ask you over there might be entirely at variance from what was discussed in the mock interview. But my suggestion would be that each time somebody asks you a question which is slightly tricky, or you have to put it in a couple of sentences, take a breath and then answer. And as one of my worthy colleagues pointed out over here, begin by prioritization. You have to say what is the most important thing first. You have a scientific bent of mind, and you've done so well in life. So that's how, and the smaller things will follow as a result of it. Focus to the point. That will also help. God bless.
All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.